Now I know you don't have to magnetise the Silent King, however there are reasons to do it, and today I'm going to show you how to magnetise the Silent King, and it's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. And if you're new to the channel and you want to learn about Necrons and more, then please subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Right, today it's time to magnetise our most awesome model of all time, the Silent King. What an awesome model this is. I've had so much fun building it. Well, almost so much fun. We'll come to that more later in the video. But why am I magnetising it? Well, actually there's three reasons for magnetising this miniature. The first reason, and the main reason, is for storage. Taking it apart, allowing you to store it and transport it much easier. Well, that's the main reason. However, there are two other reasons, and the second reason is, well, it's a breaking point for your miniature if you do accidentally knock it, or worst case scenario, drop it. So effectively, when it has an impact on the miniature, the magnetising points are the points which take the shock. They absorb the shock and hopefully will stop the miniature from breaking quite as easily, so that can be an advantage. However, the third and final reason is because it's going to be very cool, and ultimately what I want to have is I want to have the Silent King on his own little diorama base, not necessarily on the throne. So I could take him off, put him on a base and just have a really cool looking Silent King miniature. Now, of course, this is a rather big miniature, so if this is your first magnetising venture, then I'd highly recommend you watch some of my other videos to get you prepared. I'll link them up in the description below. Videos on how to do green stuff and just general magnetising tips. I've also got a full playlist called the Back to Basics series, where I go from box to final miniature, sharing all of the tips that I've picked up over the course of doing this fantastic hobby. Right, it's now time to go table down and magnetise the Silent King. Okay, so here we go. So of course the first thing to do is make sure that you remove all of the mould lines on this miniature, and I've partially built some of these pieces. I've left some of them off for painting purposes, and I've left some of them off for magnetising purposes. So I'm just going to run over quickly what I've done, and then we get to magnetising them. So the first thing I want to talk about is these menhirs, which I've basically built and glued onto the base. However, I've done a little bit more work with some green stuff on the base, and the reason for that is to basically make the piece of plastic which sits onto the base mould in to the base. I've done this with Illuminor and a few other miniatures of mine where Games Workshop are putting pieces of terrain on the base. However, if you just glue sand around that sticky out piece of terrain, then, well, it just looks sticky out. It doesn't look very natural. So I've just gone in with some green stuff and flattened them off. And I've actually done that on the main throne's base as well. So I've glued this section on and then put green stuff around, and now when you look at it, it just looks like it's part of the terrain, especially when this has sand all over it. So that's what I did first. I then built the next half, which is the piece that sits onto the base. I built this all up, excluding the stairs, which I've left off for painting purposes, and excluding this top section which the Silent King himself sits on or stands on. And the reason for that is it's going to be easier to magnetise the Silent King on there rather than being glued into position, but I will end up gluing that and this at the end. However, the first task is to get this piece here magnetised onto the base. Now, to be fair, it sits onto that section reasonably well. I mean, it's you know, it's a little bit wobbly and wiggly, and obviously it hasn't got the weight of the rest of the throne on there as well. So I think just magnetising it onto that piece there is going to make it a bit more secure, and also from a storage point of view going to be very useful to be able to take it off of the base, because storing it on the base, a little bit of pressure on here, you might start bending these little energy sections. So to be able to take that off and store it separately, I think it's going to be very useful. Now you do have some options here. You could just buy a flat big round magnet, glue one on top of that, glue one on the inside of that, and then just magnetise them together. However, that would push this piece out quite a bit, and well, I just like the idea of it being inside. So ideally you want to put the magnets flush on both sides. So the next step could be just drilling a big hole in there and then putting a magnet inside, and then obviously in the top section. However, I have a slight issue with drilling a big hole because, well, basically I've only got the Games Workshop pin vise with a maximum drill bit size of 2mm, and I'm guessing some of you guys, especially if you're starting up, that's all you're going to have either. So what we're going to do is come up with another solution. I'm actually going to put 3 magnets in here and 3 magnets into the top and magnetise it on that way. Now of course we need to get these 3 magnets matching up on both sides. There's a few different techniques. You could put the magnets in here and then put some wet paint on top of the magnets, push this on top, and you should get the paint over here, and then use the paint as a marker to drill. However, I'm going to use a slightly different system for this. I've made a little cardboard disc just out of the side of a cereal packet, and I've drilled 3 1mm holes in there with my small drill piece. And I'm going to place this on top of here. Then I'm going to drill into each of those holes, just a little marker hole. And then once I've done that, I'll do it on the other side, and then I'll get my 2mm drill bit and drill out a 2mm hole with those little marker points as my starting point. And then of course I'm going to insert the magnets into both sides, and that will allow me to align all 3 magnets together. Now I'm going to be using these magnets. These are 2 by 1mm magnets, and they're N52, which is the strength, so they're one of the strongest ones you can get in the smaller sizes. I buy my magnets from Guy's Magnets in the UK, but obviously you can find your own supplier. But 2 by 1mm magnets, N52 strength. Right, let's drill some holes out in here and pop the magnets in. Okay, so that's all done. That idea did develop slightly, as you can see by this. And basically, yes, I just drilled out the holes and I glued the magnets in. Now on this side, it glued all the way through because of course it's hollow underneath. But that was fine because the 2mm magnets just fit perfectly into the 2mm hole. I just pushed them in and made them flat, and I did that of course on this side as well. Then I thought, how about I make a little hole next to the front of the magnet so that I know which is the front magnet when I put it onto the base. And then that idea developed into, well, if I'm going to make a hole next to the magnet, why not put a pin in there? Then I've got a guiding hole to get it into place. So that's what I've done, and it's working perfectly. So I drilled a 1mm hole out, and I super glued in a paper clip and then a 1mm hole here. That's right next to the magnet, of course, on the correct side. And now all we have to do is push the paper clip into the hole, and it goes down, and then it magnetizes into the perfect position where all 3 magnets are in the right position, and that is now magnetized. Very secure, and I'm ready to move on to the next part. So really happy with that. So that's working well. Now of course I'm going to glue these steps onto here, but I'm going to do that after painting, and I'm going to glue this on here after I've magnetised the Silent King on. But before we do all of that, the next step is to magnetise this half onto here, and I think this is going to be the hardest bit, or at least this is the bit that took the most thinking about. I've thought about how I was going to do this for quite a long time, but I have come up with a solution. Now the main issue is there's these 4 little posts and there's 4 little holes. However, when you push these into position, you would expect for those posts to go all the way in. However, they don't. They are slightly raised. Now at first I thought, well, obviously it's just not fitting properly. Maybe I glued these 2 pieces together wrong. But actually, if you look at this round section here, this will be in the way if this went flush because of this sticky out bit. So clearly it's not designed to be flush on that piece of plastic, so it is slightly raised, and that gave me quite a few issues when it came to how I was going to glue this. I was thinking 2mm magnets in the holes, cut off these and then just super glue on the magnet. However, a small magnet just super glued onto there is going to come off quite easily. If it's a big magnet, then usually the surface area is quite big and it sticks well, especially if you use a little bit of green stuff. But just gluing the small magnets on there is just going to pop off. So ideally you need to be drilling a hole out and getting the magnet sort of embedded if you were going to use some small magnets. However, I felt that just having the 2 magnets on either side, especially just the 2x1mm magnets, was going to be quite weak, and I was thinking that it's going to sort of wiggle around like this quite a bit. So this is the conclusion that I came to and how I'm going to do this. So first of all, I'm going to drill out these holes. Now these holes are actually 2mm, however they're not quite deep enough to put the magnet in flush. So I'm going to drill out the holes, put a magnet in there so that it's flush with this piece of plastic. And then on the other side, just over here, the first thing I'm going to do is clip off the sticky out pieces of plastic, the little locators. Then I'm going to use these 5x1mm magnets, and I've already measured it up. And if I put these magnets on here, they're actually raised to around the right height of these protruding pieces. So I'm going to cut these pieces off, get a bit of green stuff, just pop the green stuff on there, and then super glue one of these magnets either side where these 2 sticky out bits are. Now that will give me 2 strong points to magnetise. However, I want to stop it from rocking forwards and backwards, so I'm also going to add another magnet to this. I'm going to add it right at the front, and then on here at the front I'm going to drill out 2 more holes for 2 more magnets to go in, so I'll have 3 magnetising points. Hopefully it will work out well. Now of course I don't actually know that until I've done it, so yeah, I need to do it to find out. Worst case scenario, I'll just have to glue it together, but well, hopefully I'll be able to do this with the magnets. Let's find out. First job, drill out these holes and put magnets in there. Okay, so I'm all done. I drilled out the 4 holes. I didn't go all the way through. I went deep enough to get the magnet in and it was flush. I then drilled 2 holes just here. I didn't quite get them in a straight line. A bit annoying, but makes no difference to the actual magnetising. And then on the other side I glued the corresponding 5x1mm magnets in the 3 areas, and then I magnetised it on, and whilst it was okay, it did wobble a little bit still. So what I decided to do was use the same technique as I did on the base and use some pins. So just show you on the other side here. So there's our 3 big magnets, and in this recessed area just here I drilled a 1mm hole and I glued in 2 pins. These are just paper clips, and I drilled the hole out and the paper clip goes all the way till it won't go anymore, all the way in. And then I cut them down and of course then drilled the corresponding holes just here. And now when we align the 2 paper clips into the holes and push them down onto the magnets, we now have 1 Magnetise unmoving top half of the barge. So really happy with that. The extra pins obviously just making a slight difference because of the smaller magnets that I'm using. Now potentially if I had bigger magnets I might be able to have done it without the pins, but you have to work with the tools that you've got. So I'm happy with that, and now it's time to move on to the next stage. Okay, so I've got all the bits which go onto the top section here. The Catan I'm not going to magnetise, but I've left it off for ease of painting so I can get to it a little bit easier and get to this orb, but I will eventually just glue that into position. The same for these really. I left these off just because I know I'm going to be working around this area in a minute, so I've left them off to glue into position either before or after I paint it. I'm not sure, but again I just don't see there's any point in magnetising those pieces, so that's them. Now I left this little piece off here which glues to the underside of the chair because I thought I might be magnetising the two Triarch bodyguards onto here, but I'm not 100% sure if I want to do that. However, I wanted to get all of these magnets done before I glue the chairs into position. So now I've got those magnets done down here. I'm going to glue these chairs into position and let them dry, and then I can have a look to see if I want to magnetise these little Triarch men or not. Okay, so I've glued those on there and they're nice and dry. I haven't glued these pieces on the bottom yet, still got to do those, which I'll do in a bit. So now it's time to magnetise these two guys. Now originally I wasn't sure if I was going to magnetise them, but I think I am going to, well, just because you can. Obviously I was going to leave them unglued for painting anyway, but I think just having them magnetised would be pretty cool, and potentially as this thing takes wounds, when it gets down to its different tiers, you could take the Triarchs out as it loses a level. Could be an option. Now before I talk about magnetising these, I want to talk about building these two guys, because I had a lot of fun building all of this miniature except for this guy here. This guy was the worst miniature I've ever had to build in 20 years of the hobby. The design for it is just absolutely shocking. The way it goes together, the little neck pieces, is just an absolute nightmare. I had to take it apart about 4 or 5 times before I got it reasonably well fitted. So I was dreading the second one. However, the second one went together like a hand in a glove. I had absolutely no issues. So maybe I did something wrong here, I'm not sure. But anyway, I had a nightmare doing this one. But actually, he is now magnetised because I've been doing it off camera. I'm going to tell you how I did it in a second, but there he is, fully magnetised onto the barge. Now I haven't done the other one yet, so I'm going to show you how I did it. So originally I was thinking of magnetising the feet onto the barge. However, I was thinking, how about I just magnetise the wires at the back, because that's quite a solid connection. So that's what I did, and it was really easy to do. So I've been using some very small 1x2mm N52 magnets, and all I did was I clipped the little nipple off the bottom wires, and I drilled a 1mm hole and put a magnet in there. Once that was dry, I then put another magnet on top of them. I didn't glue them, I just put the magnet on the top. And then where the magnets are going to go at the back here, I just put some glue into the hole because the hole's already the right size. So I put some super glue into the holes, and then I put it into position so that the two loose magnets were in the holes, and then I just pushed it and held it until the super glue had dried. Once the super glue was dried and the loose magnets were glued onto the barge, just a case of taking the man out and he was fully magnetised. So that is what I did. Very easy to just get in and out, and he's fully magnetised in there. So I'm going to do that on this guy here, and then we'll be back to magnetise the king himself. Okay, so that's the other Triarch magnetised, and that is everything done apart from the king himself. So let's have a look at doing that now. So of course we've got the stairs here, which I'm not going to glue until it's painted, and then we've got this platform, which again I think I'm going to leave off for painting purposes. So all we've got left to do now is the king himself. Now of course I'm on extra wide angled lens here, let's just zoom in a little bit there for you. So of course we've got the cape, and the cape is supposed to glue onto the throne. So we could potentially glue it onto the throne and then just magnetise the king into position just using magnets on his feet. However, when I take my king out, which is something I would like to do, I just think he looks so much better with his cape, so I do actually want to take the cape out as well. Now there is a gluing point on the cape. It does actually glue on his leg and on the side of the staff. However, I don't want to glue it now because I want to be able to paint the cape before I glue it. So this is going to be a bit tricky. If I could just glue the cape on now and then just basically take it off again afterwards for painting, then it would be a bit easier, but I can't do that. However, we know it's going to glue roughly into that position, so I think all we need to do is put some magnets in his feet and then put the corresponding magnets onto this thing, allowing us to magnetise it. And then when I take him off, I've been working on this. Aha! So this is my little cork diorama base for when he's not on his throne. So this is basically, yeah, just pieces of cork all stuck together. I used PVA glue. The PVA glue squirted out the sides, and then I just sprinkled some sand over the glue just to cover it up and give it a bit of detail. This will eventually go onto a base, but I don't have a spare base at the moment. And then I'll add some more detail to it, some rocks and crystals, and just make it into like a little mini diorama. So that's what I'm going to do with him. Nothing more than just for fun. So I'm definitely going to glue him to the cape and then magnetise his feet. So I think the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to drill some holes in his feet and then put in some magnets. Okay, so I carefully drilled out a 2mm hole into his foot without going out of the other side, and then I glued in a 2mm magnet. Now just dry fitting this cape into position, and I've worked out that his right leg, left leg as we look at it, is going to be on this little platform around this position just here. So the first thing I'm going to do is drill out a 2mm hole so I can put a magnet in, get him at least standing with one foot, and then I can work out where the other one goes, and then again just obviously drill out a hole and put a magnet in there. Okay, so there you go, I've put the two magnets into that piece and I've gone into the throne itself and I've glued these two blackstone pieces just there. So the rest of it isn't going to be glued on until I've painted it, so the Catan and the steps and this little stand just here, because it would just be easier to paint. I'm going to wait until I've got the cape glued on to him before I magnetise him onto my scenic base, and then of course I'll work more on that at a later date. Okay, there you go. Really hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was useful. What an awesome model this is. I can't wait to get it painted. Now if you want to see more magnetising tutorials for Necrons, here is my full playlist, and here is the Back to Basics playlist if you want to learn more about this awesome hobby. Beam me up.